at the annual meeting of the American Anthropological Association. And in my mailbox, in the hotel where I was staying, I got a message from a Professor Douglas Oliver, director of the Department of Anthropology at Harvard, who wanted to have lunch with me. I was very astonished, and I told myself, why on earth the most senior anthropologist in America would be interested to have lunch with me? Anyhow, he told me that the committee of anthropologists and educationalists was established in Cambridge, Mass, and with the aim to reform the teaching of social science in American grade schools. That was the intention. He told me that the way history was taught in America was extremely ethnocentric, and that time had come for anthropology to substitute to ethnocentric history, and to develop new teaching strategies based upon the massive use of audiovisual materials. And for that, film ethnographies were needed, and since the Eskimos were the most famous primitive tribe, if I express myself like that, it was appropriate to start with the Eskimos.
So you were then incorporated and hired because of your experience with the ethnic group, not because of your interest in audiovisual documentation.
He didn't know about my interest. I was hired because I had recently done field work in the most traditional Eskimo area. And where did Doug Oliver hear about me? From Connie Arnsberg, who was one of the supervisors for my thesis work. So that is how I arrived in Cambridge, Mass, and was told, sit down, young man, and develop a project. This summer you are going up north. We will find for you the best cameramen in the world, and there are no financial limitations, but we want the visual material. First of all, you should try to shoot traditional culture. That means some reconstruction, although we heard that Paley Bay Eskimos are pretty traditional, you should make them more traditional than they are. First. Second, the material that you will shoot, the shooting style would be simple enough for grade school children, 7, 8 years old, to understand what is going on the screen. And so that 8-year-old children will be able to build a conceptual model of a primitive society. That's the task.
You still held your position at the university in Montreal.
Yes. Leave of absence.
So this was a consultancy or
Consultancy, leave of absence, etc., etc.
Were you thrilled or somewhat daunted by this task?
Both. I was extremely thrilled and daunted. I didn't know anything about what was lying ahead, and that was it.
But they were also asking you to essentially create a storyboard, a script, or would someone else do that?
No, I wrote something like a script. No. I wrote something like an outline, let's say, a plan for filming. I had an extremely good film producer. The producer was an outstanding man, Kevin Smith, very intelligent, very capable, and I had a committee, an academic committee, chairman of the academic committee was Margaret Mead, so back family. So she used to come to Cambridge, Mass, sit on the committee. Other members of the committee were Sherry Washburn, the physical anthropologist. Then Brunner, who was director of the Institute of Cognitive Psychology at Harvard, who was the most senior sort of disciple, a student of Piaget, again, back to the old family, you see. But he was not terrorized, castrated by Piaget like the others, because he didn't stay long enough. And so it was a distinguished, also Bob Adams was on the committee. Bob Adams, who later became secretary of the Smithsonian. And so it was a distinguished group. Let's say the most senior American anthropologists were there on my committee. And I was supposed to go up north and bring the new materials with which American education was supposed to be changed, transformed profoundly, and the new educational strategies established for the whole of America.
Were there other similar projects among Native American peoples then, at the same time?
No.
While you were going north, were there others going to the Oneida, or?
No.
You were the sole film project?
Of the film project, that was the only film project of its size in history, in the history of visual anthropology.
How many hours were you expected to document?
I didn't know anything at the beginning. I know that I went there, I was given a cameraman, filmmaker, supposedly great talent. He was the only professional Arctic filmmaker. His name was Doug Wilkinson. He had spent 20 years working for the National Film Board of Canada, and he had made several of the classic films on the north. One is Angoti, the other is Land of the Long Day. And so I was told, here is a cameraman, director cameraman. He has a plane. You will fly with him in his plane. He has all the equipment that is necessary. And I decided we should go in summer at a stone weir, which I tried to film at a stone weir. So that is how it started.
These days, the few visual anthropologists I know who work with commercial television, they speak of essentially being the anthropologist who the director commands to find something out or to find a location.
No.
In this case, were you the boss?
There is no such thing as a boss. I was entirely responsible, in charge and full control as far as content was concerned. I was not supposed to tell the cameraman what lens to use and how to shoot. It was not my business. To the point that in my written contract, I was not supposed to touch the camera. I was totally forbidden access to the equipment. I was not supposed even to have a still camera. I have no still pictures of these expeditions. So that we would be free to entirely devote all our time and energy to the movie and to the movie camera, not to the still cameras.
But in the sense of deciding when to go, where to shoot, you were the boss.
I was where to go, when to go, and what to shoot. I was responsible for the structure of the films. After that, during editing. So we went with a grant of the Ford Foundation. We spent 2 months with Doug Wilkinson at the stone weir. We almost killed each other, and I have to admit now that probably I was at fault. And but anyhow, we survived. The reason was that I started teaching him. I had just graduated from Margaret Mead Seminar on Field Methods and Techniques, and that was visual ethnography. And I was convinced that I knew everything in this business. Everything I knew. And I started teaching him. Now this man had 20-25 years of film work behind him. And he was a real professional. And he had made the classic films for the Canadian North. And the result was that we almost killed each other. I tried to teach him film, not ethnography, film.
You ignored your contract.
Yes, to a certain extent. So that was a highly unpleasant story. Anyhow, we shot material, and we did send the material south, and when the committee members and the foundation heads saw the material, they said, "My God, that's a miracle. That is a miracle that we didn't know that such traditional Eskimos survived today." And that was it. And immediately after that, we obtained all the money that we needed from the National Science Foundation, NSF, and we were able to continue filming over a period of 3 years.
How many hours of footage did you shoot eventually of the Eskimo areas?
Now let me see. We followed one family over a period of 13 months. 13 months in the field with cameras. One family. And a few supporting protagonists around. Small community. Community is so small. We shot close, I think, to 500,000 feet of film. So, Doug Wilkinson refused to continue work with me. It was not exactly like that. He fell sick. When the fall arrived, snow fell, he couldn't breathe in windy weather. As soon as the wind rose, he started suffocating, and we had to evacuate him. The problem is that he must have had psychological problems also, I don't know. Anyhow, he left. And I found myself alone. The producer, very good man, found two men in Toronto. One 30 years old, his name was Ken Post, and the other 45 years old. He said he sent the two of them immediately. He said, if something happens to the one, you'll have another one. Okay. The older fellow collapsed within 3 or 4 days. He thought that he would sit on a sled, the dogs will pull the sled, and that's the way it would go. And it didn't go that way, because when we hit pack ice, he has to pull the sled himself together with the dogs, you see, and that is excruciating. So he simply physically collapsed, and I had to take him and put him on a sled, call up again radio, missionary, the generator, radio, call a plane and evacuate him. So 2 of us remained. Ken Post, 30 years old, and I also 30 years old. We stayed 9 months together. I didn't hear a single word of complaint from Ken Post. Not a word about food, about being tired, about only once I didn't give him time to reload the camera and clean the lens. You see, because there was something happening fast. And not a word of complaint. And we spent 9 months together. So, meanwhile, editing was going on in Boston.
You weren't in control of that process, the editing?
Yes,
you
I
were
was.
As well.
I was. Now, for the end, we arrived for the most major activities, the drum dances, the shamanistic seances, and winter seal hunting of the breeding holes. I thought that I should continue with Kevin Post. The producer said no, he's not good enough. He's good for the ethnographic work, but we need a man with different capabilities. So we started searching. I went to see Michel Brault from the National Film Board. He immediately turned us down. I'm not interested in filling up the camera, emptying it, and no, that's not creative work for him. I'm an artist, he means, you see. Okay, so basically the producer selected two men. One was, don't forget his name. Anyhow, one was a relatively young man, 35 years old, Bob Young, commercial, extremely commercial. He was making National Geographic specials. He was working for the National Geographic, successfully in CBS. For CBS he was working. The other was teaching film at MIT, and he was the cameraman of Flaherty for shooting Louisiana Story, and the feature, Louisiana Story, and he had made a documentary, very interesting, and Kennedy called Primary. Now, no, I don't remember it. Anyhow, Bob Young came. I was up north, I didn't know the men. I was with the Eskimos when Bob Young landed. And a few moments after he landed, let's say after the plane took over, I had prepared the setting for shooting. I told him we start. He immediately opened the camera, took the camera and started shooting. And within minutes, when he started shooting, I understood that I was in the presence of a great artist. The difference between the previous shootings, you see, and this kind of shooting was tremendous. I mean, he was not shooting with a camera, he was painting. You get a feeling that he was painting. With such facility and elegance, he was following movement. So that was it. And we spent 2 months together. Ken Post was there also as an assistant cameraman. And we shot brilliant material. We shot, I think, 35,000 feet of film with 2 cameras. One camera inside the igloo, one camera outside, frozen outside the igloo.
The three of you only, or there's also a sound team?
No.
Other assistants?
No. We worked together, 2 of us, cameraman and myself. In this particular case, special case, first-class cameraman arrived from Hollywood practically, and
the assistant.
And the assistant, who had to stay traditionally. It was impossible to dismiss him,
Was it clear how many hours of film, of finished film, for the students of grade school would be
11 hours. We produced 11 hours with no English commentary or English subtitling. Everything is in Eskimo, and the film is edited in such a way for children to follow the activities and to be able to understand what is going on in an extremely exotic society.
Was the choice to use no English language as subtitle or voiceover your editorial decision?
No. Committee. The Committee of Scholars with Margaret Mead on top. They decided that ideally for the new pedagogy, relativistic pedagogy, anti-ethnocentric, etc., concept building, where concepts were supposed to be infused in children's mind, It's, I don't know, very mysterious approach. Ideally, school children, American school children, should have been taken to the Arctic to become field workers themselves and to have a direct look at Eskimo life. Since that was impossible, the Eskimo lifestyle, Eskimo life has to be brought into the classroom with as little artifice as possible. So we were forbidden, for instance, to use the Zoom. There's no all film gimmicks sort of were eliminated in editing also. So no English commentary, no English subtitling, and one had to edit in such a way for the material to be, the visual text to be intelligible to grade school children. It's not easy. Of course, we eliminated shamanism.
Was there an
That's
understanding in
confusing.
your contract that the film stock, that you would have access to it for ethnographic purposes, for research, for teaching other than the 11 hours of film?
Yes, presume so.
And who was cataloguing this while you were producing it in the field? Was there a whole team of people?
No.
So you had to return to go through everything yourself?
You see, we spent 13 months, but in the context of 4 expeditions up north. I was returning, going to Cambridge, working with the editor, writing notes, indexing, etc., etc., and essentially establishing the structures of the films.
Were they all released in one go or sequentially?
They were sequentially, they were released in all of them by the end of the 60s. We started shooting in 63, we finished editing 69.
And what was the series called?
The Netsilik Eskimo film series.
And how was it received by the American public?
It was received enthusiastically for some time. It was received enthusiastically. There were great difficulties with the pedagogues, with the educationalists. Doug Oliver had retired meanwhile. Jerome Brunner had replaced him, the cognitive psychologist at Harvard. Sherry Washburn had gone back to California. And basically I found myself alone with Jerry Brunner. And he decided that we should develop a unit for grade 5. And the unit should be called Men, a Course of Study. The intention was to teach American children about the attributes of men. What makes men human? What makes men human? And we were supposed to use in classrooms the Eskimo visual materials for children to discover, not to be taught by a professor, by an instructor, but to discover, looking at the films, what makes us human, what makes the children in Cambridge Maths human. You see. And also what is the difference, let's say cultural difference, but that is easy. Cultural differences are easy. The idea was to teach what makes men human. There is a book published by Peter Dow, who was the administrator of the project, Harvard University Press, and this experience. So initially a program was created called MACOS, Man a Course of Study. MACOS was established, it was distributed in 4,000 or 5,000 schools in the States. I mean, there were booklets, games to go with it, all sorts of exercises, teacher training institute, 20 teacher training institutes were established in order to teach the teachers how to use the material. Revolutionary approach. And in this context also television arrived. All of a sudden television learned about the existence of this material. And they called me with Bob Young to edit an ethnographic special for CBS. And we rented a suite in a hotel, put a moviola in it, a Steenbeck, and started editing a television special for Michael Dann, director of programming, CBS. And on March 25th, I don't know, 26 affiliated stations of CBS broadcast Eskimo Fight for Life. We were sitting with Bob Young in the office of Michael Dann at CBS Tower, you know, and one wall of the office was covered with TV sets representing the different affiliated CBS stations, and we started with a pretty low rating, and suddenly the Nielsen rating increased, and at the end we beat National Geographic. You see, at the end we beat the National Geographic, and that was it.
I take it that this did have English.
Oh, yes. Then there were other spin-offs, they're called. The BBC made a 2-hour television version. Film Board made a children's television version. Altogether, there have been over 200 television bookings worldwide.
Of the same edited footage?
Different formats. Dutch television, German television, and Russian television, they broadcast the 11 hours. I know for German television the 11 hours because they put German commentary. And just in order to allow me to check on it, they had it translated into English, a big book like that. And they broadcast it in Germany between Christmas and New Year as a national cultural event.
Which year?
God knows, I don't remember anything. And BBC 2 hours.
You mentioned some problems with the BBC. Can you...
Different from Afghanistan.
Okay.
So that beginnings were euphoric. Museums. If you walk today into the museum, Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, you will find a screening room where continuously the Netflix series is being presented there to children. Other museums, recently last year, a book was published, American textbook on American Indians, called This Land Was Theirs. It is the classic textbook about American Indian culture and cultural history. Wendell Oswald wrote it, you see. It is the 7th edition. Every 3rd year or 4th year there's a new edition coming. Really the mass distribution. And he had a chapter, he's an Eskimologist himself, Napaskiak, Western Alaska. He replaced his chapter on his Eskimos, Napaskiak, with the Netzilik Eskimos. Because the students want a classic Eskimo tribe. You see, with dog teams and with igloos, and Napaskiak don't have that, they're sedentary. And he mentions the film, and he says, the best ethnographic films, I don't remember that, but I know of any, for any American Indian tribe or group, etc. And so that lasted for a few years, and then there was a terrible backlash. In parent-teachers committees. Parents started complaining that their children have been greatly disturbed by watching new films about killing seals, killing nice animals, eating raw meat, etc., 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 etc. Result, there was a national debate on television, in the press, radio, all across America, coast to coast. National debate that reached Congress, House of Representatives, plenary session, full house, May 11, 1976. And where Representative Conlon, Republican from Arizona, Bible Belt, made a speech about these films and the course, essentially, a course of study, saying that the course aimed at unteaching Judeo-Christian family values and substituting anything goes philosophy. Anything goes philosophy, etc., 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 etc. And for the films also terrible things. He said, then the House Science and Technology Committee appointed a special commission to investigate that, because this program had been funded with federal money to investigate that. I was in Afghanistan, and Margaret Mead went twice to testify in front to the Science and Technology Committee, because she was head of the supervisory board. And anyhow, when I came back from Afghanistan, I discovered that first my reputation was ruined, that the very department of NSF, which was dealing in education, had been disbanded. 35 people had lost their jobs, etc., etc. That was it. That was the end of my film ambitions.
Were you named in these hearings as an anthropologist who is guilty of un-American values and inculcating bad ideas?
I don't know. I was not present in the discussion. I was in Afghanistan. It was Margaret Mead and Peter Dow. You have to consult, if you are interested, I mean, the book of Peter Dow's book. But I wrote an article about that in Anthropology Today. I published an article. Easy to find in Anthropology Today, summarizing, just in 5-10 pages, summarizing these controversies and quoting the Congress minutes of, so that there would be no, and that's it.
I tell you what doesn't feature very much in your story so far is being a professor in Canada, in Montreal University. Did you spend a lot of time away? Did you teach? Did you have graduate students?
Yes, I taught. I had graduate students, but essentially I was in the field contributing, not filming, but contributing, organizing film projects.
And that was tolerated by the faculty?
Yeah, that was tolerated. And I have your card. I would like to send you information about a new film that the film board will be making next month, and precisely on these issues that I mentioned.
You mentioned about half an hour ago that the worst decision you made, professionally speaking, was to leave the museum.
Yes.
Still, I haven't heard why. This all sounds quite interesting, what you've done since you left the museum.
I wouldn't have been able to go to Afghanistan, for instance, or to come here had I been in the National Museum. The National Museum That means northern Canada. I was allowed to work in northern Canada. You see, when I was in the museum, I was a beginner, of course, but the museum imposed constraints and discipline on my various activities. When I quit the museum and arrived in Cambridge, Mass, all constraints disappeared, discipline disappeared, and I melted, sort of what to say. I started moving from one end of the world to the other end of the world, you see, and getting engaged into fancy projects, and I stopped acting as an anthropologist to a certain extent. While had I stayed in the museum, I would have produced other monographs on the Eskimos, maybe not related to cultural ecology and things like that.
I see. So what you're saying is that after the departure from the museum, you helped supervise, organize, instrument
Yes.
many films, and you taught a lot, but the real hardcore ethnography,
Yes,
not so
hardcore ethnography, I did not make it. There were other reasons also. The Eskimos had changed. Beginning the 70s, the new political ideology appeared among the native peoples of North America generally. And they started hating anthropology and anthropologists as exploiters who represented them. Time had come now for them to represent themselves. Several times I tried to work in these new conditions and found it disappointing, to say the least. I could collect place names for the Eskimo associations in order to demonstrate that this land was theirs in front of court when they were discussing about land rights. That I could do, and I did it, as a matter of fact. And so basically there was nothing for me to study, you see. To study the impact of old age pensions on Eskimo communities. I could do that, but it was of no great interest to me. Then in Afghanistan, I didn't write the monograph I was supposed to write. I published a dozen articles or so. The reason was that the war arrived in Afghanistan. I had prepared myself to continue my work in Afghanistan. Couldn't. A vicious war. So these are events about which I'm not responsible, you see. So basically the world changed. That is why so many French anthropologists had quit their field stations in their past colonies, and they moved back to France studying witchcraft in the French countryside, you see. So that is why I decided to go back to the Balkans when communism collapsed.
To conclude, because it's getting late, a couple of final questions. You mentioned on one of our walks the other day that you were happy to leave North America. In fact, it was
Yes.
time to leave North America when you
Yes.
did. And you also mentioned that the pension, the retirement package of a North American university professor, goes a long way in the Balkans.
Oh yes.
That I can believe. What was the motivation for leaving North America? Why did you want to leave?
You see, when I was in North America, there were moments when I could make contributions of great public interest, like beating the National Geographic on CBS. when time comes, when you realize that you cannot do that any longer, it's better to get out. You see? And it is better to get out. And I got out. So, had I been retired in Montreal, I would have stayed in an apartment and done what? Nothing. Nothing. Had I stayed in the museum, you see, I would have continued research and writing in the libraries in retirement. But
as it is, what are you?
Retired in Canada, you have no access to grants. How can I go up north without a grant? I mean, you cannot do research work in northern Canada until under two if you don't have a budget of $200 a day. It's terribly expensive. Now Eskimos and Indians, they ask something like $30 an hour for interviews. $30 an hour. They want to go to court now. Maybe that is going to be against me in the new film, because I didn't pay my protagonists during filmmaking. But I was not paid. Nobody was paid at the time. Nobody was. National Film Board never paid a penny to protagonists. I mean, now they want money. So you see, it's a nasty environment up north, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. It's not anthropology. It is something. So that's it. What else?
To conclude, how are you spending your retirement?
Well, we finished the 5th film on the Balkans, on Muslim ideology among the Pomak. The Pomak are Bulgarian-speaking Muslims. Same structural position as the Bosniak, who fought in the war in Kosovo. You see, not Kosovo, I'm sorry, in Kosovo they are the Albanian Muslims. In Bosnia, they are Serbian-speaking, Slavic-speaking Muslims. The same people, same kind of people exist in Bulgaria. They're called Pomak. And what are their ideological orientations after September 11th? That's the question that we try to answer. In the context, there are new songs, for instance, gypsy songs, invented in Bulgaria. You can hear them in taxis and the streets about Osama. Osama, Osama, bin Laden, Osama, Osama. And down, deep down, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda. See, that is the context. That is the context. September 11th. And being a Muslim in the Balkans, what does it mean after September 11th? You go to America as a refugee, you go to America, and you say, Allah bless my family. You see, that is their motto. Now they come back from America, after they have made money, they come back to the village, and in English they say, Allah bless my family.
On which happy note, you too have come back from America, and are living in Sofia. And I'd like to thank you for these 2.5 hours of interview.
Thank you.